On June 30th, 2022, in Cordova, Tennessee, a series of events unfolded that followed a familiar pattern of domestic violence escalation. The home had been the subject of previous domestic disturbance calls. Warnings were documented, and law enforcement was aware of prior incidents. That evening, a confrontation occurred. According to the Shelby County affidavit, Byron Pipkin shot 28-year-old Marquicha Thomas, the mother of his children, outside the home. A 6-year-old child was present in the garage, and a 10-year-old child witnessed parts of the event from a vehicle. After the shooting, Pipkin dragged her body into the garage before leaving the scene with the younger child. He drove to a relative's home to drop the child off, then fled to a Memphis motel. Hours later, he called 911 claiming that Thomas had been shot by another man. Law enforcement located him, leading to a standoff with SWAT that lasted several hours before his arrest. In the days that followed, the community reacted. A candlelight vigil was held along the Mississippi River, attended by family, neighbors, and local advocates. The gathering highlighted what advocacy groups identified as a repeating pattern: multiple warnings, limited intervention, and a fatal outcome.
When they take a loved one, they don't know how much it really hurt to lose my only daughter I had.
Prior to Marcus Briscoe's child being taken away, he says the warning signs were there and his deepest fear came true last week.
I had told her, I said, if a man beating on you and pulling guns on you, sooner or later, he gonna kill you and I'm gonna have to bury you. And it went just like I said.
Pipkin ended up being arrested after a tip led officers to a South Memphis motel where they took him into custody.
Get out. Please get out. If he fighting you, pulling guns on you, get out the relationship, because sooner or later, like I told my daughter, he is going to kill you.
Despite what led up to her death, loved ones are choosing to remember her as the light in which she was.
It's about the kids, and I just want everybody to stay in good spirits and, love everybody while they're here.
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Marquicha D. Briscoe Thomas was a 28-year-old mother who lived in Cordova, Tennessee, a suburban area in Shelby County near Memphis. She was widely known in her community as a devoted mother of 8 children. Her life was centered on raising her children and managing the demands of a large family. Those familiar with Marquicha describe her as warm, loving, and resilient. Balancing the responsibilities of motherhood with personal challenges defined much of her daily routine. Despite the demands of raising 8 children, she maintained connections within her family and neighborhood, often seen as a reliable figure in her close-knit circle. Family was the center of Marquicha's life. Her father, Marcus Briscoe, was a vocal figure who would later speak about his concerns for his daughter's safety. She maintained close ties to her extended family, and her children were heavily reliant on her for daily care, routines, and emotional stability. 8 children depended on Marquicha's care and presence in their home. Her father played an active role in voicing his worries regarding her well-being. While details of her personal relationships were largely private, one relationship in particular would become the focus of concern: her involvement with Byron Pipkin. This relationship, though initially romantic, would ultimately be linked to her death. Before the fatal incident, there were signs of potential danger. Family members reported concerns regarding domestic tension in Marquicha's relationship. Although patterns of controlling or abusive behavior were suspected, not all incidents were formally documented. Some relatives observed behavior that suggested potential risk, but there was no formal intervention prior to the tragedy. The man connected to Marquicha's death was Byron Pipkin, approximately 33 years old at the time. He was already known to local law enforcement due to prior incidents, including domestic assault. Reports indicate that he was in possession of a firearm, which he allegedly held illegally. Marquicha and Byron were involved in a romantic relationship that eventually led to cohabitation. Initially, Their relationship appeared to follow a typical dating trajectory. However, according to accounts from those close to Marquicha, the relationship became increasingly volatile. Witnesses later shared that domestic disputes and signs of escalating violence were observed in the months preceding her death. Multiple warning signs existed. Byron allegedly displayed threats and intimidation behaviors toward Marquicha, creating an unsafe environment. Family members raised concerns and issued warnings about the potential danger she faced, but these warnings went largely unheeded. These red flags would become critical in understanding the events leading to June 30th, 2022. The fatal day began like any other in Cordova, Tennessee. By late morning, the situation turned violent. At approximately 11:45 a.m., the Shelby County Sheriff's Office received reports of gunfire at a residence on Crosswood Lane. Deputies were dispatched to the scene immediately. Upon arrival, deputies discovered Marquicha Thomas critically injured from multiple gunshot wounds. Emergency medical services responded, and she was transported to Regional One Health in Memphis. Despite the efforts to save her life, she was later pronounced dead. The events that unfolded were described in the investigation as chaotic and violent. Marquicha reportedly attempted to flee during the shooting. Evidence suggests she was shot and then dragged into the garage area of the residence. Shell casings were recovered, and a blood trail was observed leading toward the garage. Investigators also noted the presence of the suspect's vehicle near the property. One of the most devastating elements of the scene was the presence of her children. Several of the 8 children were home at the time of the shooting. Some may have directly witnessed portions of the incident, while others were indirect witnesses to the aftermath. Detectives documented multiple shell casings that aligned with the caliber of the suspected firearm. Blood evidence indicated movement from one area of the property to another, consistent with the theory that Marquicha tried to escape before being overtaken. The suspect's vehicle was later identified as part of the investigation, linking Byron Pipkin to the scene. Neighbors and nearby residents reported hearing multiple gunshots around the time of the 911 calls. Some observed commotion at the property, while others saw movement that indicated an attempt to flee or struggle. Family members also provided statements about their long-standing fears regarding Byron's behavior. Several of Marquicha's children were present, creating a critical witness component in the investigation. Although many details about their statements were not immediately released due to their age, law enforcement confirmed that the children were at the residence during the violent event. The incident began as a domestic-related shooting that drew an immediate response from law enforcement. Officers arrived at the residence following reports of gunfire and disturbance. Upon arrival, the scene was immediately secured to prevent any further risk to the public or responding personnel. Inside the residence, officers discovered a domestic violence situation that had escalated to lethal violence. Multiple children were present in the home at the time of the shooting. Following standard safety protocols, the children were quickly removed from a residence and transferred to the care of child services and relatives to ensure they were out of harm's way. Investigators on the scene confirmed the shooting was domestic-related after interviewing witnesses and family members. Statements indicated that the confrontation had been ongoing and involved a male suspect with a documented history of violent behavior. The initial assessment revealed that the suspect had fled the residence immediately after the shooting, leaving behind a chaotic crime scene, but no additional victims. Crime scene technicians documented the area with photographs, collected physical evidence, and interviewed all available witnesses. Preliminary findings confirmed that the shooting had been targeted, deliberate, and directly connected to a history of domestic disputes involving the suspect and the victim. Based on witness accounts and prior domestic violence reports, law enforcement quickly identified Pipkin as the prime suspect in the shooting. Officers coordinated with local and regional units to initiate a targeted manhunt. His known addresses, associates, and previous hideouts were checked first, and law enforcement issued a be on the lookout alert to all units in Shelby County and surrounding jurisdictions. The breakthrough came when investigators traced Pipkin to South Memphis, several hours after the initial incident. Surveillance footage and community tips confirmed his presence in the area. Law enforcement teams tracked him to a local motel, where he had barricaded himself inside a room. This development triggered a law enforcement standoff that involved SWAT units and crisis negotiators. The standoff continued for several hours as officers attempted to negotiate a peaceful surrender. Law enforcement followed standard containment procedures to prevent the suspect from escaping or causing further harm. Despite the heightened risk, the situation concluded without additional injuries. Pipkin was taken into custody and transported to the Shelby County Jail for processing. Investigators immediately began compiling evidence to secure a solid case against Pipkin. A firearm recovered from the motel room was identified as the weapon used in the shooting. Forensic examination confirmed that shell casings collected from the scene of the crime matched the recovered firearm, linking it directly to the fatal shooting. Surveillance footage from nearby properties and street cameras provided further confirmation of Pipkin's movements before and after the incident. Witness statements from neighbors, family members, and the children who were present corroborated the timeline of events and the suspect's involvement. Additional evidence included phone records, prior domestic incident reports, and physical evidence recovered from the crime scene, such as ballistic fragments and DNA samples. Together, these elements created a comprehensive case file demonstrating premeditation and direct responsibility for crime. After gathering sufficient evidence, the Shelby County District Attorney's Office filed multiple charges against Pipkin. These included first-degree premeditated murder for the deliberate and intentional killing of the victim, especially aggravated kidnapping, due to the presence of children and their exposure to the violence, felon in possession of a firearm, stemming from the suspect's prior criminal record, domestic assault and outstanding warrants connected to previous incidents and active legal issues at the time of the shooting. The legal proceedings began with an initial appearance, where Pipkin was formally charged and informed of his rights. An arraignment followed, during which he entered a plea. The court set bail conditions that reflected the seriousness of the charges, and the suspect remained in custody throughout the process. Evidence hearings focused on establishing the chain of custody for firearm, confirming ballistic matches, and introducing witness statements that supported the prosecution's case. Witness preparation was meticulous, given the involvement of children and the emotionally charged nature of the events. The trial itself presented a clear narrative built on physical evidence, forensic analysis, and corroborated testimony. The prosecution successfully demonstrated that Pipkin acted with premeditation, had a history of domestic violence, and carried out the crime despite the presence of multiple children. After deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all major charges. Following the verdict, the court scheduled sentencing, with prosecutors seeking life imprisonment without the possibility of parole due to the severity of the crime and the aggravating circumstances surrounding it. The prosecution strategy centered on three key themes. Premeditation. Evidence showed that Pipkin had ample opportunity to leave the situation without resorting to violence. His decision to arm himself and carry out the shooting indicated a deliberate and conscious choice. Presence of children. The crime was committed in a home with multiple minors present, placing them at direct risk and causing significant trauma. This factor elevated the seriousness of the charges and strengthened the prosecution's case. Violent escalation despite opportunity for intervention. Records showed that the suspect had prior interactions with law enforcement and ongoing domestic disputes. Authorities highlighted that he escalated his behavior from prior assaults to lethal violence, underscoring the danger he posed to the community. These arguments contributed to the successful conviction and the likelihood of a maximum sentence. The case underscored the intersection of domestic violence, firearm access, and the need for swift intervention in repeat offender scenarios. The death of 28-year-old Marquicha Thomas did not remain a private family tragedy. Her story quickly moved into the public sphere, drawing attention from neighbors, community members, and advocacy organizations. In the days following her death, her family began speaking publicly, framing her case not only as a personal loss, but also as an example of systemic gaps in domestic violence prevention. Her father, Marcus Briscoe, became the primary family spokesperson. In interviews and public statements, he highlighted what he described as a failure of existing systems to protect his daughter. He referenced prior reports and warnings about domestic violence and questioned why law enforcement interventions had not prevented the final outcome. His remarks were direct, noting that families can call for help repeatedly, yet victims can still be left vulnerable. These statements resonated with many in the community, as Shelby County has seen repeated instances of intimate partner violence leading to fatal outcomes. Neighbors and extended family members also voiced their reactions. While the family maintained a focus on procedural failures and systemic accountability, the broader community expressed concern about the broader trend of escalating domestic violence in the region. Conversations began to circulate online and within neighborhood associations about the difficulty of accessing protective resources, the delays in response times, and the limitations of current victim support services. A candlelight vigil was organized along the Mississippi River, a location symbolic for the family and community. The event drew neighbors, family members, church affiliates, and local domestic violence advocates. Attendees gathered at dusk, holding candles and forming a circle to honor Marquicha's memory. The vigil included a reading of her name and a brief timeline of her life, emphasizing her role as the mother of 8 children. No formal speeches were made beyond brief remarks from community leaders and representatives of local victim support organizations. Advocates attending the vigil used the gathering as an opportunity to hand out literature on safety planning and domestic violence hotlines. The event was documented by local media outlets, with images of the lit candles reflecting across the river. This visual symbol became part of a growing social media conversation about domestic violence in Shelby County. Following the vigil, social media tributes spread rapidly. Posts highlighted Marquicha's identity as a young mother who navigated the responsibilities of raising 8 children. The narratives emphasized resilience and determination, but the messaging focused on awareness rather than personal grief. These online discussions expanded into broader conversations about the prevalence of domestic violence in the Memphis metropolitan area. Local advocacy groups used hashtags related to victim safety, resource access, and community intervention. In some cases, individuals shared personal accounts of similar experiences, underscoring the risk that prior warning signs can go unaddressed. The online attention ultimately sparked public dialogue on domestic violence intervention, with citizens and organizations asking pointed questions about how the justice system responds to repeated calls for assistance. Media coverage amplified this conversation, framing Marquicha's case as one that illustrated ongoing risks for domestic violence victims in the county. The incident prompted systemic questions about the effectiveness of existing protections for domestic violence victims. Central to this discussion was the issue of prior warnings and repeated domestic disturbance calls. Records indicated that law enforcement had interacted with a household before the fatal incident, raising concerns about why these interventions had not escalated to stronger protective actions. This case became part of a larger pattern of intimate partner homicides in Shelby County. Data from local law enforcement and advocacy organizations have documented multiple cases in which women reported threats or sought assistance before being killed by current or former partners. Analysts and advocates point to gaps in several key areas: protective orders and enforcement. Victims often obtain temporary restraining orders, but follow-up monitoring is limited. Resource accessibility. Emergency shelters and relocation assistance are in high demand and can be difficult to access in urgent situations. Law enforcement follow-up. Domestic calls that do not result in immediate arrest or injury may receive minimal follow-up, leaving potential threats unresolved. Advocacy groups responded by calling for increased victim resources and legislative reform. Recommendations included expanding access to safe housing for high-risk victims, improving the tracking and enforcement of protective orders, and increasing coordination between law enforcement and community-based intervention programs. Shelby County has consistently reported high levels of domestic violence-related homicides, particularly involving intimate partners. Local authorities have acknowledged that while response protocols exist, prevention efforts face significant challenges. Key challenges include high caseloads for domestic violence units, limiting proactive monitoring, limited shelter capacity, leaving many victims without immediate relocation options, victim reluctance to pursue charges, often due to economic or family pressures. Experts note that these conditions create an environment where warning signs can escalate into fatal incidents, as was the case with Marquicha Thomas. The legacy of this case lies in its ability to serve as a public reminder of urgent systemic gaps. Community members, policymakers, and advocates have cited Marquicha's death as an example of why stronger intervention protocols are needed. Her story has the potential to influence awareness campaigns aimed at educating the public on recognizing high-risk domestic violence situations and reporting early warning signs. Local organizations have also discussed leveraging the case to push for policy reforms, including expanding state funding for domestic violence shelters and victim relocation, strengthening enforcement mechanisms for repeat domestic violence offenders, implementing risk assessment protocols to prioritize cases with escalating threats. In this way, the case moves beyond a single family's experience and becomes part of a broader narrative about domestic violence prevention and systemic responsibility. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.